Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're taking something that sounds abstract, like self-worth, and putting it on the table in a way that feels real, usable, and honestly, a little uncomfortably familiar.
And that's the point, right? The uncomfortable part is usually where the honest part lives. Self-worth sounds like a grand idea, but in daily life it shows up in tiny reactions, tiny decisions, and tiny compromises.
Exactly. It shows up when you reread a text, when you feel weird after a meeting, or when you notice you're smiling just a little too hard because you want everything to seem fine.
And then, later, you ask, why did that feel so heavy? That's usually the clue. If one small moment can change your whole mood, something deeper than the moment is getting touched.
Maybe that's a good place to begin. What do people usually confuse self-worth with? Because I think a lot of us mix it up with confidence, success, or being liked by the right people.
Yeah, and those things can look similar from the outside. Confidence can help you act. Success can help you shine. Being liked can feel nice. But self-worth is what stays when none of those things are speaking for you.
That's such a good way to say it. When nobody is clapping, nobody is replying, and nobody is telling you did well, what do you still believe about yourself? That question gets quiet very fast.
It does. And quiet questions are dangerous in a useful way. They don't shout, but they wait. They sit there until you're tired or lonely or slightly embarrassed, and then they ask what you really think of yourself.
And for a lot of people, the answer is not very kind. Not because they're bad people, but because they've learned to borrow their value from outside approval for so long that they don't know how to check inside.
Right. It becomes a habit. Someone reacts warmly and you feel solid. Someone is distant and you feel smaller. Your mood starts dancing to other people's rhythm, and that's a very exhausting way to live.
It's exhausting and sneaky because it can look like personality. People think, oh, I'm just sensitive, or I just care what people think. But sometimes it's more than that. Sometimes it's an unstable sense of worth.
Yeah, and instability is the key word. If your worth changes every time someone changes their tone, then you're not standing on worth at all. You're standing on weather.
That is a really good line. Standing on weather. That feels exactly like what approval dependence does, because one day it's sunny and you feel great, and the next day it's cloudy, and suddenly everything feels personal.
And then the brain starts working overtime. It says, what did I do? What did I say? Did I make it awkward? Did I seem too much, too little, too eager, not enough? That mental interrogation can last hours.
And sometimes the other person didn't even notice anything. That's the wild part. We create a whole emotional courtroom in our head while the actual event is already over and gone.
Exactly. The event ended, but the inner trial continues. That's one reason self-worth matters so much. It protects you from turning every passing interaction into a verdict on your value.
Let's stay with that for a second. When do you think people first learn to do this? Because I don't think anyone wakes up and says, today I'll measure my existence by a reaction time or a compliment.
No, it's usually more gradual. Maybe praise came when you achieved something. Maybe attention came when you were useful. Maybe calm only came when you made things easy for other people. The pattern teaches itself.
So you start connecting safety with performance. Being good, being helpful, being impressive, being agreeable. And then you carry that logic into adulthood without noticing it's become the rule book.
Exactly. The rule book says, stay useful and stay lovable. Don't be inconvenient. Don't take up too much room. Don't risk disappointment. It sounds practical, but it quietly trains you to abandon yourself.
That's a hard phrase, but it's true. Abandoning yourself can look very polite from the outside. It can look like being easygoing, or flexible, or supportive, while inside you're constantly shrinking.
And shrinking becomes normal. You don't notice the missing parts because you've gotten used to the smaller version of yourself. Then, one day, you realize you're exhausted, and you barely know why.
That exhaustion is such a signal. People often think they need better time management or more sleep, and sometimes they do. But sometimes the real issue is emotional labor. You are managing how you appear all day.
Yes, managing is the right word. Managing your tone, your timing, your face, your reactions, your replies. At a certain point, you're not living, you're curating. That's incredibly draining.
And curating can be mistaken for maturity. People say, well, I'm just being careful. But being careful is not the same as being inauthentic. One protects your values, the other often hides your needs.
That distinction matters a lot. You can be thoughtful without editing your whole personality. You can be kind without performing a version of yourself that everyone will find acceptable.
I want to ask something that might sound simple, but it's not. Why does approval feel so powerful when it's so brief? A compliment lasts seconds, but it can shape your whole afternoon.
Because approval feels like safety. When someone affirms you, your nervous system hears relief. It says, okay, we're not in trouble. We're not being rejected. We're not alone. That relief can be addictive.
Addictive is such a good word because you don't just want approval, you start needing it to settle the inside noise. Then every text, every glance, every response becomes a tiny dose of relief.
And if you're not getting it, your mind starts craving it more. That's when you begin checking, over-explaining, double messaging, replaying conversations, or making yourself smaller to get the right reaction.
Which means the whole system keeps feeding itself. You feel uncertain, so you seek reassurance. Reassurance helps for a minute, but then the uncertainty returns, and you seek it again. It's a loop.
Yeah, and loops are hard because they feel like coping. You think you're solving the discomfort, but often you're only managing it. Managing is not the same as healing.
That feels important. Managing can help you survive the day, but healing changes what the day is doing to you. Maybe that's why this topic is so powerful. It asks us to move from survival mode to steadiness.
And steadiness starts small. People want a dramatic breakthrough, but self-worth usually grows through boring-seeming acts of trust. Say you'll rest, then rest. Say you'll stop apologizing, then stop.
That sounds almost too simple, but I know it isn't. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, You send the message that your own word matters. That matters more than a lot of people realize.
Because if your word doesn't matter to you, everything becomes negotiable. Your time, your energy, your boundaries, your rest. Then other people's urgency starts deciding your life for you.
And that's where resentment sneaks in. You say yes when you mean no. You smile when you want to pull away. And then later, you feel angry. But the anger is coming from a place of self-betrayal.
Absolutely. Resentment is often a delayed boundary. It's your mind saying, we kept going past the point where we were comfortable, and now the bill has arrived.
That's such a vivid image. The bill arrives. And it often arrives in quiet forms. Fatigue, irritability, numbness, or this weird feeling that nobody really sees you because you've made yourself easy to miss.
Making yourself easy to miss is a real issue. People think invisibility is safe, but it can become lonely. You save yourself from judgment, sure, but you also save others from knowing the real you.
And then being known starts to feel risky. If somebody likes the edited version, what happens if the real version shows up? That fear can keep you stuck in polished conversations and tired relationships.
Right, and if every connection depends on polish, then honesty starts to feel dangerous. But honesty is where self-worth gets tested, because it asks, can I be myself and still remain okay?
That question is huge. Can I be myself and still remain okay? For many people, that's the exact fear underneath the perfectionism, the overthinking, the people-pleasing, all of it.
And perfectionism is interesting because it pretends to be high standards, but often it's really fear wearing good clothes. It says, if I do everything right, nobody can criticize me, leave me, or see my flaws.
But the cost is enormous. You can spend your whole life trying to become critique-proof and still feel unsafe the moment someone is unimpressed. So the goal can't be perfection. It has to be resilient.
Yes, resilience means your identity doesn't collapse every time you're human. You made a mistake, you had an awkward moment, you were not the best in the room. That's information, not a collapse.
I like that. Information, not collapse. Because self-worth turns mistakes into data, not destiny. Without it, mistakes become identity. You don't think I did something awkward. You think I am awkward.
And that difference changes everything. One is a moment. The other is a story. If you keep turning moments into stories, your inner life becomes a dramatic series with no off button.
Which is probably why so many people feel tired by lunchtime. They've already had 12 imaginary meetings with their own insecurity. That sounds funny, but it's kind of true.
It is funny in a painful way. And since we're being honest, I think a lot of us use busyness to avoid that inner meeting. If I keep moving, I won't have to hear what I'm really afraid of.
That makes sense. Stillness can be confronting. When the phone is silent, and the work is done, and the room gets quiet, suddenly the mind starts asking, okay, who am I when I'm not needed?
That's a profound question. Who am I when I'm not needed? Because if your sense of worth is based on usefulness, then rest can feel like guilt, and being unavailable can feel like failure.
So Let's talk about that directly. What does it look like to be useful without making usefulness your entire identity? I think many listeners need that distinction in practical terms.
It looks like doing good work without needing the work to prove your existence. It looks like helping because you care, not because your value depends on being essential. And it looks like letting others carry weight too.
That last part is hard. Letting others carry weight. A lot of us are secretly afraid that if we stop overfunctioning, the relationship, the project, or the whole system will fall apart.
Yes, but that fear often overestimates our responsibility. Sometimes we've been carrying things that were never ours to carry alone. When we set them down, we discover the world keeps going.
And that discovery can be surprising, even emotional, because part of self-worth is learning that the universe does not end if you are not indispensable for a few hours. You are allowed to be ordinary.
Ordinary is underrated. Ordinary means you don't have to perform your value every second. You can simply exist. And existence itself is not a test you have to pass.
I want to pause there because that's a gentle sentence, but it's also radical. Existence itself is not a test you have to pass. A lot of people have never really heard that before.
Maybe they have heard it, but not believed it. Belief is the harder part. You can intellectually agree that you matter and still behave like your worth needs constant evidence.
True. And behavior tells the deeper truth. If I say I matter, but I ignore my exhaustion, accept disrespect, and apologize for every preference, then my actions are still speaking a different language.
Exactly. Self-worth isn't a slogan. It's a pattern of choices. It shows up in what you allow, what you refuse, how you rest, how you speak, and what you no longer chase.
That makes it feel more tangible, because people often wait to feel worthy before they act differently. But maybe the actions come first. Maybe you behave with respect before you fully believe it.
I think so. Sometimes belief follows practice. If you've spent years acting like your needs are optional, you may need repeated evidence before your nervous system starts trusting a new pattern.
Repeated evidence is such a smart phrase. Not one heroic moment, but repeated evidence. Like small promises, clear boundaries, honest pauses, and saying, no, that doesn't work for me.
And saying no is huge, because many people think no is rejection, when often it's just self-respect. You are not attacking anyone by having limits. You are describing your shape.
That's beautiful. Describing your shape. I think of it like that too. You're not asking permission to exist. You're informing the world of your edges. That can feel uncomfortable if you're used to being endlessly flexible.
And people who benefit from your endless flexibility may react when the shape becomes visible. That reaction can make you doubt yourself. But a boundary being inconvenient does not make it wrong.
No, it really doesn't. In fact, sometimes inconvenience is the sign that a boundary is finally doing its job. If nobody is ever inconvenienced, maybe you've been over-accommodating for too long.
That's a good test. Not every discomfort is a warning sign. Some discomfort is just your life adjusting to healthier structure. It feels strange because the old pattern was familiar. not because the new one is bad.
That's reassuring because unfamiliar can feel threatening, even when it's healthy. A calmer life can initially feel boring to someone who's used to emotional chaos. The nervous system can mistake calm for emptiness.
Exactly. Calm can feel like loss if chaos has been your normal. So rebuilding self-worth may include tolerating a different emotional texture. Less drama, more steadiness. Less adrenaline, more presence.
Presence is a big one. When you're present, you're less likely to split yourself into observer and performer. You stop watching your own life from the outside, grading every move in real time.
And that observer voice can be brutal. It notices every pause, every hesitation, every imperfect sentence. But being alive includes pauses and hesitations. Speech itself is not meant to be polished all the time.
Especially not here. I mean, one of the best things about conversations is that they wobble a little. They repeat, they drift, they recover. That's what makes them human.
And maybe self-worth is similar. It doesn't have to be smooth. It can wobble a bit and still be real. The goal is not to never feel insecure. The goal is to stop obeying insecurity automatically.
That's such an important difference. Feeling insecure and obeying insecurity are not the same thing. You can feel the fear and still choose a response that protects your dignity.
Yes, and that choice is a muscle. At first, it feels strange. You say, "No, I need time," or "No, I can't do that," or "Actually, I'm not comfortable with that." And your body may panic a little.
But panic is not proof you're wrong. Sometimes panic is just proof you're doing something new. If your whole system is used to self-abandonment, self-respect will feel like rebellion at first.
And that's okay. Rebellion can be healthy when the old rule was hurting you. The point is not to become rigid or defensive. The point is to become more faithful to yourself.
Faithful to yourself. I love that. It feels kinder than disciplined and more honest than confident. Because some days you will not feel strong, but you can still remain faithful to what you know you need.
Exactly. You can be tired and still hold your boundary. You can be anxious and still tell the truth. You can be unsure and still refuse to disappear. That's self-worth in practice.
So maybe we should talk about the hidden ways people disappear. Not physically, obviously, but emotionally. What does that look like in relationships?
It looks like agreeing too quickly, laughing off hurt too fast, saying it's fine when it isn't, trying to be the easiest person in the room so nobody has to deal with your real feelings.
And then the relationship has no space for reality. It becomes pleasant, but shallow. You may be liked, but you are not fully met. That can hurt in a way that's hard to name.
Because people often confuse harmony with health. But harmony created by self-erasure is not true harmony. It's silence. And silence can hide a lot of emotional cost.
Silence can definitely hide cost. And when people finally speak up, they sometimes feel guilty, like they've broken something. But often, they've just interrupted a pattern that was already breaking them.
Yes. Speaking honestly can feel disruptive if you've trained yourself to keep the peace at any price. But peace that requires your disappearance isn't peace. It's a postponement.
A postponement. That's such a strong word. It means the conflict is still there, just delayed. So eventually, the self-worth question comes back. Do I want approval badly enough to keep paying for it?
And if the answer is no, then the work begins. Not in a dramatic, overnight way, but in tiny acts of recentering. Every time you choose truth over performance, you're depositing into yourself.
That's a helpful image. Depositing into yourself. It makes self-worth feel less mystical and more practical, like something you can build with daily choices instead of waiting to receive from outside.
Right, and that's liberating. Because if outside approval is the only source, you're dependent on other people's moods forever. But if you can build inward trust, you gain a kind of freedom.
Freedom is the right word. Not the freedom to ignore everyone, but the freedom to stay grounded while people react. That lets you listen without becoming owned by every opinion that passes through the room.
And that's especially important in the age of constant feedback. Social media, group chats, comments, emails, scene receipts, typing bubbles. The world is practically designed to train people in external measurement.
Yes, and that measurement can become exhausting fast. Suddenly, your value feels attached to numbers, response times, audience reactions, engagement, all these little signals that were never meant to define your soul.
Exactly. Numbers can inform you, but they can't tell you who you are. A low response does not mean you're unimportant. A delayed reply does not mean you are rejected. But anxious minds often translate it that way.
Because anxious minds want certainty, even if the certainty is harsh. At least harsh feels specific. Ambiguity is harder. A neutral message can trigger a whole story if you're already hungry for reassurance.
And that's where practice matters. You learn to pause before assigning meaning. You ask, what do I actually know here? What am I adding? What if this is just a neutral moment and not a hidden judgment?
That pause can save a lot of suffering. It creates space between the trigger and the interpretation. In that space, self-worth gets a chance to speak before fear does.
And self-worth usually says something calmer. It says, maybe this isn't about me. Or, even if it is about me, I can handle it. Or, even if they're disappointed, I'm still whole.
I like that last part. I'm still whole. Because so much of insecurity is the false idea that a reaction can split you open permanently. It can hurt, yes, but it doesn't define your structure.
Exactly. Hurt is not identity. Feedback is not fate. Disappointment is not doom. Those are sentences worth repeating because the anxious brain forgets them the second tension enters the room.
Then maybe repetition is part of healing too. Not just one insight, but 1,000 small reminders. Sometimes you don't need a new philosophy. You need the same truth said enough times to feel believable.
That's very true. And the truth we keep coming back to is simple. Your worth cannot depend on unstable sources. If it does, every day becomes a negotiation with the outside world.
And negotiation is tiring when it never ends. So, what are some first signs that someone is starting to rely less on approval? What changes would you notice?
You'd probably notice more pauses before saying yes, more comfort with silence, less panic after a message is sent, less need to explain every decision, and maybe a slightly calmer relationship with mistakes.
That sounds lovely, honestly. Not perfect, just calmer. Calmer enough to think before reacting. Calmer enough to feel a feeling without immediately turning it into a crisis.
And calm enough to say, I need a minute, instead of instantly pleasing, fixing, or defending. That little gap can change everything because it gives you ownership of your response.
Ownership is a good word too. Your response belongs to you. Your body, your time, your energy, your standards. Those things can be shared, but they shouldn't be surrendered by default.
No, and surrender by default is often what approval seeking becomes. You give up pieces of yourself preemptively because you imagine that's how to keep connection. But real connection can survive your honesty.
That's one of the most hopeful ideas here. Real connection can survive your honesty. If it can't, then maybe what you had was not actually connection, but performance with nice lighting.
Performance with nice lighting. And it's funny because lots of people are in those rooms, doing their best to be liked, while secretly hoping somebody will say, you can relax now.
And maybe we can be that voice for ourselves more often. You can relax now. You don't have to earn every breath. You don't have to justify existing. You don't have to be impressive to be allowed in.
That's powerful. And I think that message matters because so many people live as if they are auditioning for permission to take up space. But space is not something you earn by being useful enough.
No, it isn't. Space is part of being human. And once you start believing that, your whole posture changes. You stop folding yourself into other people's preferences quite as quickly.
And that change can be subtle at first. Maybe you speak a little slower. Maybe you say what you mean the first time. Maybe you stop apologizing for simple needs. Those small shifts add up.
They really do. Small shifts are often where big change hides. People expect a dramatic transformation, but self-worth usually grows in ordinary moments, like choosing rest, or telling the truth, or not chasing a response.
Not chasing a response is a huge one. It's almost a form of emotional restraint. You feel the urge to pursue reassurance, but you let the moment breathe instead of immediately filling it with panic.
And that breathing room can reveal a lot. Often, the urgent feeling passes, and what remains is simply a desire to be seen. That desire is human. The key is not making it the ruler of your life.
Exactly. Wanting to be seen is natural. Needing visibility to survive emotionally is what becomes painful. One asks for connection. The other asks for permission to exist.
That's a beautiful distinction. Connection says, let's meet. Permission says, can I stay? And self-worth is what helps you answer yourself first. Yes, you can stay.
Yes, and that internal welcome matters. If you can welcome yourself, other people's reactions become data rather than destiny. You still care, but you don't collapse.
That feels like the goal. Care without collapse. It sounds almost impossible when you're in it, but I think that's what healing is supposed to do. Not erase feeling, just reduce collapse.
And maybe we should be honest that collapse can be seductive. Sometimes being overwhelmed gives you an excuse not to decide. But self-worth asks for a decision. It asks, will you keep abandoning yourself or not?
That's a tough question, but a necessary one. Because if you answer honestly, you can start seeing where your life has been organized around everyone else's comfort instead of your own integrity.
Integrity is a strong word, and it matters here. Self-worth and integrity are connected because both ask you to align with your own truth when nobody is rewarding you for it.
So maybe the practice is this. Notice where you get shaky. Notice what you beg from others. And then ask whether that thing could be offered inwardly first. Could I reassure myself? Could I slow down? Could I stop performing?
Those are great questions. And if the answer is no at first, that's fine. The point is not immediate mastery. The point is honest noticing. Awareness creates options, and options create change.
I love that. Awareness creates options. Because once you can name the pattern, you're no longer trapped inside it in the same way. It doesn't vanish, but it loses some of its invisibility.
And invisible patterns are often the most powerful ones. They operate in the background, shaping your choices before you even know you've made them. Naming them brings them into the light.
Which is why conversations like this matter. Not because they magically fix everything, but because they help people recognize themselves. And recognition is the beginning of change.
It really is. You hear a pattern described and think, oh, that's me. Not in a shameful way, but in a clear way. Then the next question is not, what's wrong with me, but what do I do with this now?
That shift from shame to curiosity changes the whole tone. Shame says hide. Curiosity says learn. Self-worth grows better in curiosity because curiosity assumes you are worth understanding.
That's a great line. Worth understanding. People often think they need to be fixed, but a lot of the time, they need to be understood, supported, and given room to practice something new.
And practice can be awkward. The first time you set a boundary, it might sound stiff. The first time you don't over-explain, you might feel guilty. The first time you ignore a reassurance urge, you might feel weird.
All true. But weird is not failure. Weird is the sound of a new habit entering a system that used to run on fear. If you expect it to feel weird, you're less likely to interpret weirdness as danger.
That's comforting. So if someone listening is thinking, I want stronger self-worth, where should they begin tomorrow morning in practical terms?
Start with one promise you can keep. Maybe you'll take a real lunch break. Maybe you won't check your phone for 10 minutes after sending a message. Maybe you'll say what you mean in one clear sentence.
That feels doable. And I'd add one more. Notice the moment you start performing. Just notice it. Don't shame it away. Say, there's the habit again. That awareness alone is already a step.
Definitely. Labeling the habit creates distance from it. Instead of, I am needy, you get, I'm having a reassurance urge. Instead of, I'm impossible, you get, I'm worried right now.
That language is gentler and more accurate. It keeps you from turning a temporary state into a permanent identity. And permanent identity is where so much unnecessary suffering begins.
Exactly. You are not your worst reaction, your hardest day, your most awkward sentence, or your need for reassurance. Those are experiences, not verdicts.
Experiences, not verdicts. I think that might be one of the core messages today. Because if people can hold on to that, they can start to loosen the grip of other people's reactions.
And once the grip loosens, there's room for more honest relationships, too. Less guessing, less performing, more saying what's true. That kind of space can feel scary, but it's also deeply relieving.
Relieving is such a good word to end on because this whole topic is really about relief from the pressure to earn your place every second. You already have a place. The work is remembering that.
And maybe the reminder is enough for today. Not fixed, not perfect, just reminded. Because sometimes the most healing thing is hearing again and again that you do not have to disappear to be worthy.
Thank you for being here with us. Keep listening, keep noticing, and keep treating yourself a little more like someone worth staying with.
And if today stirred something up, good. Let it stir. Then let it settle. We'll be back next time with more of the kind of conversation that helps you hear yourself a little more clearly.
Until then, be gentle, be honest, and remember that your value does not need to be approved in real time.
Absolutely. Your worth is not up for a vote every time someone reacts.
Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you in the next conversation.
See you next time. And yeah, maybe send the text without the 5-minute panic spiral this time.
No promises, but maybe fewer panic spirals. That's still progress.
That is definitely progress.
All right, bye for now.
Bye.